Available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. I saw the trailer for Avengers Doomsday yesterday, and the only thing I can say about this trailer is that this film is doomed. And not doomed in a good way because Dr. Doom is coming to go out here and confront Marvel's heroes as related to this multiversal crisis, but the movie is doomed because the studio of Disney just does not want to admit that it's just time to move on. Now, as somebody who's been studying the entertainment industry for the last 25 years, I know that there's an Achilles heel to these studios, and that Achilles heel is money. And because the Marvel Cinematic Universe went out here and made billions of dollars at the box office, the executives at Marvel Studios just want the cash to keep coming in. Unfortunately, when it comes down to stories basically have to end, and when it came down to the story of the Infinity Saga, that was basically the end for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it was the end for the Marvel Cinematic Universe because Tony Stark's story had basically been told. Now, when it comes down to film is very different from comic books because in comic books, yes, the story basically ends and then a new story arc starts. However, when it comes down to films basically have a character transformation arc, and once the character transformation arc basically ends, that's when the character's story is basically over. And with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we basically had an overreaching arc, but the whole thing with the overreaching arc of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was that that whole story was revolving around Tony Stark, and Tony Stark was the main character of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was the one who we were going on the hero's journey on, where he went from being this selfish corporate executive who basically only cared about himself to basically reaching a point in Avengers Endgame where he sacrificed his life so that everyone else could live a better life, and that's what made Tony Stark a hero. I mean, his whole story arc basically ended, and once his story arc ended, basically the story for the Marvel Cinematic Universe was over with Phase 4, which was basically really pushing it as related to story based on what I learned from Sid Field in his book, Screenplay. Now, in Sid Field's Screenplay, he talks about how it's supposed to be a 3-act paradigm as related to a screenplay, and basically with each act you basically are trying to reach the point where the character comes to a full transformation, and Kevin Feige did accomplish that over the course of these phases, and he really did stretch things with Phase 4, but the whole thing is that the story was basically over. Unfortunately, with Marvel and Disney, they were just so caught up in the billions of dollars that they were making at the box office that they wanted to continue on with this story, not having the sense that George Lucas had in the 1980s when he realized that after Return of the Jedi, the Star Wars saga was basically over at that point. I mean, George Lucas in 1983 realized, okay, I've already taken Luke on the hero's journey. He's gone from being this naive farm boy with dreams as related to war to eventually becoming a Jedi who redeemed his father, and realized that that story was basically over, and decided to move on to other things like Indiana Jones and Howard the Duck. Unfortunately, when it came down to Disney is thinking about dollars and cents, and as they think about dollars and cents, they're not really having that understanding about how story works. Now, when it came down to Disney, when they, after Phase 4, basically what they did was look to go out here and continue with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Unfortunately, they had no focus or direction, and as they had no focus or direction, they did not have that lead character to be that guide to take us through the overreaching arc, and that's where we started to see the serious problems with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as related to Phase 4, because without that lead character to create the overreaching arc, there's no reason to care about anyone in the story. I mean, we basically started with Eternals, and that story was basically unfocused and had no lead character that we could go out here and connect with. And then after that, we got film after film that really, again, did not build a larger world of characters we could care about. And as this was going on, eventually these films started to go out here and start flopping, basically with Eternals underperforming. And then we had Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Then we had Thor: Love and Blunder, and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Mediocrity, and a whole bunch of television series. But unfortunately, these series were filled with ancillary characters and not a lead character to guide us through the universe to make us care about anything in it. And that's what culminates with Doomsday. Doomsday basically is a whole attempt by Marvel Studios to try to get this whole thing right, but there's no way to get this whole franchise back on track because you don't have a lead character. This lead character doesn't want anything, and there's no reason to care. No, what we've got is Doctor Doom coming in to take on a bunch of characters we already don't like and don't care about. And because we don't like and don't care about these characters, this whole trailer never really resonated and never really made you feel anything as related to anything about caring about anyone. And with this film, basically we've got an overloaded cast, again, as related to a whole cast of characters, but there's no real story there. I mean, yeah, we got Doctor Doom, who basically is going out here and looking to reshape the multiverse, and there's no reason to care because all the people we really cared about are basically dead. Tony Stark is dead. Again, Steve Rogers is in another reality. Thor is basically a shadow of a man, and the Hulk and Spider-Man, nobody really cares about them anymore, and there's nobody there that can make us really feel a connection to this crisis, to make us really care about it. Yeah, we got a bunch of characters on the screen for nostalgia, but there's no real reason to care about any of these characters at all because we never built an emotional connection to them or built a relationship with them over the course of multiple movies. I mean, yeah, we got X-Men coming from Fox from 20 years ago. We got the Cable and Deadpool gambit. We got Shang-Chi, and again, a bunch of people, but we have no connection to those people. And since we have no connection to these people, this is why this whole trailer basically was just a big meh to me, and not the thing that excited me, like movies like Captain America: Civil War, where again, we had a connection with Bucky because of his relationship with Cap, and we also had this connection with Tony Stark. Basically, he was trying to learn how to care about people, and he was basically, again, being a bit overzealous as related to the Slovenian Accords. Again, there was a lot of story there to make us connect with these characters. Unfortunately, with this new whole Doomsday, it basically, again, you got a group of jobber Avengers and a Fantastic Four we don't care about, and some X-Men from another world, and again, other characters, but there's nothing there that really resonates because basically the story has been told. Now, this was something I had to experience as a writer, and I remember I was sitting there where I was writing Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in about 2024, and as I was writing Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer, I basically reached the point where I said, hey, there's no more stories I can tell with Matilda. Her story has basically been told, and I realized, like George Lucas in 1983, okay, this character's story is over, and it's just time to move on. That's what I basically learned when I was writing Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. As I put fingers to the keyboard, I was saying to myself, there's nothing else I need to say about this character. I've basically told everything as related to their story. And while I had ideas to say, hey, I want to do a Spinsterella 5, I said to myself, the character's story is over. Let her go out on top and let her story basically end. And that's where I said, okay, it's time to put a period at the end of Spinsterella. Her story has basically been told, and I don't want to go out here and tell any more of her story because it would just basically tarnish what is already there as related to the statements I have made. And that's the way I believe is the situation with Marvel Studios. Basically, Kevin Feige is at a point where he just needs to go out here, and he should have put a period at the end of things with Avengers Endgame. He should have put a period at the end of things and let this whole series basically end. There was no more story to tell as related to Tony Stark. Once Tony Stark died, the Marvel Cinematic Universe died. Unfortunately, what Disney keeps trying to do is trying to revive its corpse, not understanding every effort to revive its corpse basically leads to them losing money, and you're losing money because you don't understand the rules of story, and that's something Robert McKee talked about as related to his book story. Again, you got to know when the story is basically over. You've got to understand there's a point where your story basically ends, and when it ends, you just have to do like George Lucas did in 1983 and just say, okay, we've told this story, the hero's journey is over, and now it's just time to move on. It's time to move on to other things and other properties, and that's what's really been impeding many of these Hollywood movie studios as related to these superhero movies. Yes, there's a whole big catalog of Marvel and DC characters. There's a huge catalog of them. Unfortunately, a lot of these characters just aren't bankable, and you have to realize that basically, it's time for us to just move on. The audience basically is tired of superheroes as I see it. Basically, it's time to start going out here and exploring some new concepts and new ideas. It's been time for I would say, about 7-8 years. I would dare even say ever since 2019, and Disney is just wasting money and time continuing to make these Marvel Cinematic Universe movies when the story was basically told, and nobody really cares about these ancillary jobber characters. Nobody cares about these background characters, and they're not strong enough to build a world around. Nope, they're not strong enough to build a world around. Unfortunately, Hollywood keeps trying to go out here and trying to think that they have a license to print money, but the whole thing is that you're running out of ink, and as you're running out of ink, you're basically, again, spending good money after bad, trying to go out here and chase that high that you had from the previous movies and that high of success. That's basically what a lot of executives in. They don't understand, okay, I've had my time with this concept and it's just time to move on. They're not like me or George Lucas. I mean, with Spinsterella, I basically said to myself, yeah, I told this character story. This character story is finished. And now that this character story is finished, it's time for me to go out here and do two things: either explore a new character or just go out here and take a break or move on to something else. It's just, you reach a point where you just have to say that, okay, we had a great era. I mean, Marvel Studios had a great, I would say, almost 20 years as related to making these films. But at this point, basically, we just have to admit that when it comes down to this Marvel Cinematic Universe, everything was basically done in 2019, and right at this point, it's just time for everybody to just go out here and realize it's time to tell some new stories and explore some new concepts, because everybody, as I see it, really just needs a break from superhero movies, and we need this break from superhero movies to go out here and be able to, so the studios can go out here and regroup and possibly create something that people can care about and create stories we can care about, and not sit here and continue to try to rehash the same material in the same uninspired way that the studios have been doing with films like Avengers Doomsday. Because what I saw on the screen with Avengers Doomsday was a desperate attempt to try to revive a dead franchise, similar to what I saw with Rocky V or what I saw with Superman 4, basically a desperate attempt to try to get this train back on the tracks when it just doesn't fit within the rules of story, because in the rules of story, again, once the character's transformation arc ends, their story is basically over, and once their story is over, there's nothing else to tell, and the only thing that creative people can do is just move on to the next concept and move on to the next story. That's the only thing a producer can do. Yeah, you made this money, you had a good time with this money, but if you want to go out here and continue making money, you're going to have to let this one go and move on to a new one. That's everything a creator has to do. And I had to do that myself, again, with Spinsterella, and I may have to do it with Isis and Esteem and John Haynes. There may be, again, it may be reaching a point where I basically have finished those characters' story arcs, and I just need to just move on. Again, there comes a point where a creator has to say, you know what, I've said all I need to say about this character. I've said all I need to say as related to the commentary that I'm making, and once I've made my point, it's just time for me to just let the audience go out here and take a moment to think, and let them go out here and be able to appreciate the material, because if I keep trying to add to it, then people aren't going to value it at all. That's what happens when shows go over more than the seasons that the story is told. I mean, I've seen many shows do that, but the same thing is happening here with Avengers Doomsday, and that's why this film basically, I believe, is doomed, no matter how big the cast is. Basically, yeah, you got all these characters here for nostalgia, but you didn't answer that critical question, and that critical question I have to answer as a screenwriter is, why should we care? And who is the main character? Again, you have no main character. You have nobody there to be having a conflict of what they want, and no reason to care. I mean, I could care less about anything in this movie. I mean, Steve Rogers in some hipster clothes, I don't care about that. Thor basically, again, trying to be serious after being jokey for things. And again, Sam Wilson, Captain America, and a bunch of jobbers. I don't care about any of that. It's nothing special on the screen. And if there's nothing special on the screen, any smart studio executive would not have greenlit this movie and would have understood basically that when it comes to Doomsday, Disney is doomed to go out here and have one of the biggest bombs since Warner Brothers' Supergirl this year. Now, if you want to check out my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, that's available in paperback on Lulu.com, and it's also available in digital format on Amazon's Kindle or Google Play. And my other comic, Esteem, No Good Deed, is available on Kindle for just 99 cents, and it's also available on the Esteem series book, Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you want to check out how I write fantasy characters in a shared universe, which is I call the SJS Direct universe, you can check out the books of the SJS Direct universe, like the Isis series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and my Spinsterella series. And all those books are available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format, and they're also available on Draft Digital and Google Play and other online booksellers. And if you want to see me go out here and take superhero movies to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, an offer he can't refuse. The man who rules the world gets a job offer he can't refuse in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, an offer he can't refuse at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Runway of Doom. The goddess next door struts her stuff on the catwalk to take on a runway of rogues in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Runway of Doom at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Esteem, a New Woman. The devilish diva starts on the road to becoming a new creature in Christ in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem a New Woman at Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.